Welcome back to my channel. Today, we're diving into a topic that's been making headlines around the world, the complex and often misunderstood Israeli-Palestinian conflict. You've probably heard that the Israeli-Palestinian dispute is complicated, and that's true. And sometimes you probably wonder, why hasn't the Arab world done anything to help the Palestinians? Well, I'm going to answer that question for you here. So let's get into it. Why has the Arab world's response to Israel's action, particularly following Hamas's October 7th attacks on Israel, seemed so weak? Firstly, there is no monolithic Arab world. We need to dispel a common myth, the idea of a united Arab world. The Arab world is far from being a single unified entity. It consists of 22 nations ranging from Algeria in North Africa to Oman on the Arabian Peninsula. Sure, most of these countries speak Arabic, but that doesn't mean they share the same political vision. Think of it this way. Just as European nations in the EU don't always agree on contentious issues, neither do Arab nations in the Arab League. Yes, they consistently condemn Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories, but when it comes to deciding on a unified response, there's no consensus. So, the verdict? The disunity among Arab nations makes it nearly impossible to have a clear, unambiguous response to Israel's military and political actions. Second, Israel's Arab neighbors are politically weak. Let's talk about Israel's neighbors. Despite the emotional support for Palestinians on the Arab street, these countries are in no position to confront Israel directly. They are economically constrained, and many of these regimes rely heavily on external support from the US and the International Monetary Fund, or IMF. And here's the kicker. Confronting Israel isn't just about taking on Israel, it's also about confronting the US, Israel's staunchest ally, constantly reminding the world that the US has Israel's back. So, unless these countries are ready to risk a US intervention, they're unlikely to take an aggressive stance against Israel. Now, let's zoom in on a few key players. Lebanon. Lebanon is in crisis. The country hasn't had a functioning government for years, and the state is practically bankrupt. Military vehicles can't even leave their depots due to a lack of fuel and maintenance, and citizens are resorting to extreme measures just to access their own money. So, what's the verdict? Lebanon is neither militarily nor economically capable of significantly impacting Israel's operations in Palestinian territories. Hezbollah, Lebanon's state within a state. Hezbollah is a different story. This group holds a deep-seated hatred for Israel and possesses military capabilities far beyond those of Hamas. But why haven't they launched a full-scale attack on Israel, especially after the assassinations of their key leaders? The answer might lie with Iran, Hezbollah's primary backer. It seems Iran isn't interested in escalating the conflict to a regional level, at least not yet, possibly to avoid giving Israel or the US an excuse to strike its nuclear facilities. So, the verdict? At least for now, Hezbollah has chosen to keep things under control. Now let's turn to Egypt. Egypt has managed to stabilize politically after the Arab Spring, but the economy is still struggling, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic and the Ukraine war, which drove up food prices. Egypt is also battling an Islamist insurgency in the Sinai Peninsula, which borders Israel. Given these challenges, Egypt is in no position to confront Israel. The country's leadership is more focused on maintaining domestic economic and political stability and staying on good terms with the US to ensure continued military aid and IMF support. Verdict: Egypt may have the military capacity to confront Israel, but not the economic strength to sustain any conflict. Syria. Syria is still dealing with the aftermath of its civil war, and while Assad's regime has regained some stability, the country is far from unified. With so many internal issues, Syria has no capacity to engage in external conflicts. Verdict: Syria is just too preoccupied with its domestic problems to challenge Israel. Jordan. Now, Jordan's situation is unique due to the high percentage of Palestinians in its population. But it's a small country with limited military and economic resources. The Jordanian regime, like Egypt, relies heavily on US and IMF support, making it reluctant to engage in any conflict with Israel. Verdict: Jordan will focus on humanitarian efforts, make a lot of noise, but won't take any direct action against Israel. Additionally, Jordan will face challenges managing its local population. The king is walking a tightrope. Iran, the elephant in the room. Despite its reputation, Iran's revolutionary regime is dealing with numerous challenges, from economic sanctions to domestic unrest. Even with high oil prices, Iran's economy is struggling and its involvement in regional conflicts is draining resources. Iran is also dealing with internal issues like a low level insurgency and its ongoing rivalry with Saudi Arabia. While Iran is happy to see Israel bogged down in conflict, it is not willing to risk its nuclear program by escalating tensions with Israel or the US. Verdict: Iran will likely continue to support groups like the Houthis and Hezbollah from a distance while avoiding direct confrontation. Nonetheless, the recent killing of Haniyeh will elicit some type of response from Tehran. We'll have to wait and see if the Irani regime can balance the need for retribution with its desire to contain the conflict. Why isn't the Arab world accepting Palestinian refugees? This is an easy question to answer. Arab nations fear that if Palestinians leave Gaza, it will pave the way for Israel to annex the territory, build on it, and leaving these Palestinians permanently exiled. Economically, these neighboring countries are also in no position to absorb large numbers of refugees. And some final words. So, what can we take away from all this? The Arab world, despite its strong rhetoric, has limited tools to influence Israel's actions. Israel's neighbors are dealing with their own economic and political struggles, and the US's unwavering support for Israel makes it even harder for them to take a stand. Ultimately, The best hope for peace in the region may lie in international pressure through the UN and its agencies. A two-state solution may be the only viable path for Israelis and Palestinians to live together in harmony. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you next time.